All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts.
David Lee Huynh is an award-winning book narrator, an actor, and member of the Dungeons & Dragons Encounter Party. How did a young man from Louisiana make it onto the New York stage and into DC's All-Star Superman audiobook?
We're here with actor and writer David Lee Huynh. Thank you so much for coming to our show, Asians in Art.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
David, let's take you back to nearly the beginning. You come from Louisiana, right?
I do, born and raised in Lafayette, Louisiana.
What was that like?
It was confusing. My parents enrolled me in public school in Louisiana without teaching me English. So when I started public school, I was thrust in the situation where I was the only Vietnamese kid and I couldn't contact or communicate with anyone. And so they kind of saw me and were like, what do we do with him? Let's push him off into English as a second language. And that was good because I think in my regular classes, there was a lot of, at the time I didn't understand, but racism. People just didn't know how to deal with this kid of immigrants. And the children, you know, they have no filter and they have a lot of acquired behaviors. It came out in a lot of unhealthy ways. But thankfully, ESL was kind of the cream of the crop as far as diversity in Louisiana and Lafayette at the time. I was going to take English classes with kids whose parents were also immigrants or they themselves from other countries. So all of a sudden, where I was made to feel like a misfit in my regular classes, it all kind of gelled together in my ESL classes. And I think my teachers were just really lovely about making sure we all fit in and, you know, arming us with English as a skill so that we can go forth and be okay.
So I heard that in high school is where you actually formed your own theater group. And so what started that?
So ESL was like my first group of misfits, and I think theater was the continuation of that. We were all misfits in theater, and we felt really comfortable with each other. We were doing weird stuff. We were doing plays that we probably shouldn't have been doing at 14, 15 years old. My first full-length play was Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. We were doing like Three Penny Opera, Twelfth Night, an all-high school cast of The Pillow Man by Martin McDonough. But we were able to do those things because we trusted each other, and we kept wanting to make these plays better and better. And so we thought, you know, we have this space and time together in this theater academy that we're a part of. Let's dumpster dive for these props we don't have. Or like, there's a movie theater closing. We can probably steal one of the screens and use that as a psych for the back of the stage. Because we wanted to make everything that we were doing better together.
So how did that go from, you know, being in a space where you could use your imagination to actually then becoming a professional actor?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think a lot of people face a lot of heartbreak when they make that transition, because I was really lucky. High school, and to some large extent, even undergrad, was this place of pure exploration and joy and just feeling like the art was connecting me to a bigger world. And I was able to put on characters that were so far removed from myself, speak in ways that I just don't speak. But then when it came time to finding a career in the professional world, I realized that the industry and society has Asian people in very clearly defined boxes. When I finished grad school, I moved to New Orleans because at the time they had really generous film and tax credits, and so the on-camera industry was thriving. They called it the Hollywood of the South. And I remember meeting some other actors while I was there in an on-camera class. And we swapped info and we stayed in touch and we became each other's community down there because we were all moving there together. And a few months in, I realized, oh, they're going on like 3 times the auditions that I'm going on. And none of them are expected to speak broken English or just speak completely different languages, or the roles that they're playing aren't like asexual nerds or like immigrants.
The usual, like you speak English really well.
Right. And my response to that is always, thanks, you too. Yeah. Which always gives people a little record skip moment. And then they realize what they actually said and what
exactly.
I said. Yeah. But yeah, it was that moment where I realized, oh, the industry is not what I want it to be. And I think a lot of actors have that moment of like self-reflection when their hopes and expectations and dreams meet the reality.
Your parents, particularly your father, initially wasn't keen on the idea of you becoming an actor, right?
Oh, they were so pissed. I'm going to be totally honest. They had dreams and ambitions. I was 6 years old, and you know what they got me for my birthday? They got me a medical journal, like this thick. It was probably like a foot thick. And I remember flipping through thinking, these pictures are great. Not realizing at 6 years old that they really had a path set out for me.
Brainwashing you to be a doctor.
Right, yeah, pediatric cardiology to be specific. And so the plan was, I was in contact with Duke University, and when I was 16 or 17, I had gotten letters from them saying that they were really looking forward for me to apply and enroll in their university in a pre-med track. And my parents were thrilled and thought, yes, our son is going to be a doctor. This is going to be great. And then they come home one day to a letter on our kitchen table addressed to them from me, telling them that I had decided to enroll in the local university, University of Louisiana at Lafayette, to become a theater major instead. And they were livid. They were so angry. But I had planned a weekend trip in New Orleans, so I let them like sort it out amongst themselves, and I came back like a few days later when they cooled down a bit, and then we had a discussion. But yeah, they were not happy with it.
So how did you try to convince them that this is what you should be able to do? And were they convinced?
I think ultimately that was a concern. Their anger at me and their disappointment came out of concern and fear that their son, who I was kind of a miracle son to them. My mom was 40 when she had me. My dad was 50. They had already had other families. They were each other's second spouse. So my dad had been married to someone else before in Vietnam, but then after the war, he had to leave. And so his wife was not able to come with him to America. My mother had married someone that she met over here, but he passed away before she met my dad. And so when they got together, they thought, you know, this is going to be great. It's nice to meet you. But then they had me, and that was a huge surprise. And so I think in a lot of ways, having me brought them together in a way they didn't expect, but also gave a lot of fear in their lives, because now they're responsible for this new life in this country that they've been struggling so hard to build just a new identity in. And so a lot of their fears and anxieties about me were entrenched in this concern that they wouldn't be able to help me, or I wouldn't be able to build a life for myself. And so how I tried to address that was I worked really, really fucking hard. Like, I think I can comfortably say I am never the most talented person in the room, but I work really hard. And so if I can see the goal or am in a room where there's work happening that I'm really excited by, I try to do my part and try to show up the best that I can. And whatever I don't know, you know, rehearsal is all about figuring it out and learning what you don't know together.
So let's go to when you finished your training as an actor and then you decided to move to New York. Why was that?
Yeah, so when I finished my training as an actor, I think I moved to New Orleans first because I was scared. New Orleans felt like the safe choice. I'm from Louisiana. New Orleans is objectively the coolest town in Louisiana, and there was a lot of on-camera work at the time. So on paper, still thinking of the practical ways of being an actor, trying to satisfy my parents and make sure that they're not too worried about me, I moved to New Orleans and had those experiences. I was able to do some cool stuff. I was called back for really interesting high-profile projects. I booked a Popeyes commercial. I was able to do interesting things. I was working at almost every equity theater in the city, but just something didn't feel right. Part of it was the racism that was entrenched in the entertainment industry and in the area at the time. And some part of me felt really unfulfilled and felt very depressed about that. But then I was offered a job doing a school tour for the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, I believe they've been operating over 100 years at this point, or at least 90 years. They're one of the largest nonprofit theaters in the country, based in Ashland, Oregon. And going up there is like Disney Theaterland. At the time, they were doing 11 or 13 shows a season, so you could go and in a weekend see like 7 shows. It's insane. And going there helped me connect with these theater artists who had been doing it for decades and talking with them. I took as many coffees as I could. I was the young actor being like, hey, can you get coffee with me? Can we hang out? Can I just like hear what's going on? And I think all of them were just like, sure, kid. But they were happy to sit with me, and just hearing their story, I think it helped alleviate some of my fear, because I was also among an incredibly diverse company. I met artists there that I still admire so much. Armando McLean, Moses Villarama, Amy Washke. Amazing actors with huge, generous hearts who just told me about their time creating lives in theater. And that kind of unlocked something in me. My first time visiting New York, I was 14 years old on a choir trip in New York, and I was just like wide-eyed. I remember walking out of my first Broadway show, the original Broadway cast of Hairspray. The first snows of the year were beginning to fall, and I could see the snow reflecting off the marquee, and this Louisiana boy was just charmed, like immediately. And something about the energy of the city, I couldn't understand. I didn't have the vocabulary to really capture it when I was that age, but I knew that it had changed me. But it was, the idea of moving there was so scary, and so to want that would mean so many things. Denying my responsibility to my family or those expectations.
Yeah.
Or at the time, 14, I didn't even know that I wanted to be an actor at that time. So how in the hell would I get to New York City? But when I was 24, 25 years old, working in Ashland, having trained as an actor, talking to these great artists that I admired, it unlocked like, yeah, I think New York is it. And so after that contract ended, I went back to New Orleans to close out a show, and then packed my car up and drove up to New York.
So what was it like when you first came here? Was it super difficult, I'm sure?
I think there's a lot of culture shock that you're not prepared for when you move here. And for me, a part of that was the cost of living. All of a sudden, everything was like a third more expensive than I was used to. And so I had to be really careful. I moved here with some savings, but I was like, oh no, I need to find a job like yesterday. So I hit up everything I could. I think I was...
So what kind of stuff did you do?
I did everything.
Like what?
Canvassing. I showed up for like so many organizations and tried to canvass for them, but like after...
Actually, that's pretty good for networking.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. Canvassing gets you understanding the streets, the neighborhoods, the people. I don't think it's, I mean, I haven't done it myself, but I think it's actually a good way to network.
I think so too, but I never got to learn that because they didn't ask me back for a second day.
Oh, no.
Because I think it was just something about the job that I was just not very good at it. I sold tickets for the New York Philharmonic for a hot minute. I tried to work in food service, but that was actually a pretty closed-in network. It was hard to penetrate that. Okay. So what I ended up doing, I tried to be a cater waiter, and those shifts were crazy. But what I ended up doing was I applied for a position at a temp agency, and they placed me at the Council on Foreign Relations. And I was in charge of selling tickets to the live events, and that ended up being a great fit. I was great at sales.
Council on Foreign Relations?
Yes.
That's like a political, like governmental organization, right?
It is.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
It was great. So we were doing like live events for like, there was one, I remember it was an energy summit where they invited the Department of Energy from Brazil with like private organizations in the US. We had events where like NBA Commissioner Nate Silver was there. Retired General Martin Dempsey was giving a speech at one. And so I was all of a sudden in charge of selling tickets for these events, and they liked the way that I spoke to people. And so they asked me to like actually, oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And that's why you're also a great voiceover and audiobook artist, award-winning.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I think a part of that was because of my training in Shakespeare and classical theater. So with that, you're taking dense, archaic text and you're trying to match the length of a thought to the actual line on the page. And so I think the ability to communicate those ideas, those complex ideas, fits naturally into long-form narration. That was my last regular survival job before things started picking up and I could kind of make a cobblestone living as an actor here.
So what does it look like in terms of, you said that things started picking up. What does that mean?
I was very conscious about the economics of my life. What is the absolute minimum that I need to spend to live life the way that I want to live my life? And I got it really low. And so that allowed me a lot of flexibility because I could break down per hour how many hours a week I needed to work, how many hours a week I could network and go to auditions. Because at the time, when I was a non-union actor fresh to the city, I had to go to EPAs, which are equity principal auditions. Actors Equity is the Stage Actors Union. They mandate every producer of a show to have EPAs so that, in theory, they can meet new talent. As a non-union actor,
It was tough.
it's tough because they prioritize union actors for these auditions. So you could show up at 5 a.m., not joking, 5 a.m. to an appointment. They'll start taking names at like 8 a.m. and start seeing people at 9 a.m. They will go through all of the equity actors first before they even see the non-union actors. And so for me, I had to be really strategic just through that alone. If I was going to, I remember I went to do audition for Shakespeare in the Park. They had over 1,000 union actors show up. They already had their slots filled out. And so these were people signing up for being fillers for anyone that didn't show up. And then they would see non-union. So by like, the audition started at 9 a.m. By 9:30, they were like, okay, we're not seeing any non-union today. So that's like that. But my way in was I targeted Asian American theater companies or independent nonprofit theaters that maybe don't have the same profile as Shakespeare in the Park or the Public Theater. And I tried to be seen that way. And through that, I started being seen. I remember I went to an EPA and I got called back. And the way it works is the EPAs happen, and at the same time, the theater company is working with a casting director to call in actors that they specifically want to see. So this is happening parallel to the EPAs. I got called back for a show. So this is after they had seen the actors that they actually wanted to see in their initial round of appointments. So I was grouped in with the actors they had like sought out. I remember walking into my callback. The director is there with the artistic director of the company, one of their artistic producers, and the casting director. And the director is sitting with his hands behind his head. He looks so bored, and he just goes, "This guy, I found him at an EPA. See, it happens." I was like, what? It was a very strange experience, but I was getting seen by people, and people were remembering me. And then through that, I booked my first off-Broadway show. While that was going on, I was also self-submitting myself for roles around the country, working regionally. So
What does it mean to self-submit?
to self-submit means that if I see a show being produced by a theater company, I would look up the contact info of that theater company. Some companies, God bless you if you do this, Buddha bless you if you do this, they would have their artistic director's email on their website where their staff information was. Sometimes they'll have a casting director's email if they have an in-house casting office. Sometimes it's just info@theatercompany.com.
But just send it.
I would just send my resume, my headshot, and I would say, "Hey, I saw that you announced this show in your season. I would love to audition for the role of blank. Please let me know if you'd like to take a self-tape." And this was like 10 years ago before lockdown. So I was kind of asking a lot at the time, but I was stubborn and I wanted to be seen. But because of that kind of initiative, people were like, okay, great. Because they ultimately have a problem. They have plays they want to do. They need to cast them. And if you're going to help them with their problem, then great.
Right.
So more often than not, people would let me self-submit and send a tape in, and I got seen regionally that way. So I was hitting the ground here in New York, going to these EPAs, and I was also self-submitting my stuff around the country. And through that, I was able to cobble together jobs. So like that year where I really was able to become an actor full-time, I had done a show in Arkansas and then came back to New York to do a show off-Broadway. And then I had another show booked out of the city. And then while I was out of the city, right before I left to do this job out of town, another off-Broadway theater company called me back for another show. And so I was able to book another off-Broadway show right before I left for a regional show. And that led to this really great opportunity that kind of blew up in a way that I didn't expect and helped establish me as an actor in New York.
So you spoke about your family earlier, and I did see your one-man play recently, Bleep You Very Much, which I really enjoyed. Very personal story about your difficult, challenging relationship with your family, particularly your mother. How did this play come about?
First, thanks for coming to see it. I feel like making art in New York can often feel like you're screaming into the void. So when people come and they see you, it's really beautiful. So thank you. It started because a theater company called Yangtze Repertory Theater of America had a program called Project YZ. It's the same company that produced the Salesman play that Joe May was in. And they had this fellowship where the only requirement of people chosen for this fellowship was to do whatever it takes to make you a better artist. And I was granted this fellowship, and I was like, great, what do I do? And so I used part of the reward money to go to Vietnam and spend a month with my parents. And while I was over there, I just talked. I brought my sound equipment, and I would just make tea or snacks, and like we're doing now, and just chat with my parents.
So they had moved back from the States back to Vietnam, is that right?
My parents spend half the year in America and half the year in Vietnam.
It's a very sensible choice.
Yeah. Right now, all of our immediate family is in America. It's really, I think, it means a lot for them to be able to go back because they didn't choose to leave. They had to leave. But whenever I was over there and interviewing my mom especially, I just had a moment where I thought, oh my God, we've come such a long way. And hearing her talk about the circumstances of her life and why things led to her being in America alone gave me an empathy for my mom that I just didn't have before because I just didn't know. And that was the seed. And I thought, there's something here, there's a story here, but I don't know what it is yet. And so when I came back from that trip, I started writing in isolation on my laptop. And I had 14 pages. And I had those 14 pages, and I had this fear of continuing because I wasn't even sure if it was good or interesting. But I kind of got over that and asked some friends that were working on a play with me in New Haven to sit and just listen to my pages. And so they sat, I got some snacks, and we listened to my pages. And they had such wonderful things to say, and they were like, oh my God, this is interesting. Go more. I want to know more about this, this, and this. And using that as kind of my North Star, I kept writing. And then I linked up with a director friend of mine, Nana Dakin. In 2023, we had worked together on a play called The Chinese Lady by Lloyd Suh at Everyman Theater in Baltimore, Maryland. And she's one of the best directors I've ever worked with. I've rarely felt as safe and celebrated as a collaborator as I did with her. And so I told her straight up, this is a very sensitive project for me, and I'm not quite sure what I'm doing. Can you help me? And she graciously said yes. And so that was 2024, June of that year. I was expected to have a presentation as part of my fellowship for Project YZ. And we got another residency at HB Studio to give us space. And so for 2 weeks, we just worked on my script. In those 14 days, I must have written 11 drafts of my solo show. But by the end of it, I did 2 on-its-feet presentations of the script. And they were packed, full of friends, and people were floored. I think they were shocked to learn so many sensitive details about my family life, and also shocked that my voice as a writer seemed so strong and so specific. And so it was encouragement to keep going.
Asians of that generation, though, parents don't necessarily talk about their past much. As you were growing up, did you know anything about their past?
No.
Had you asked, though, before? Had you asked them, or you didn't feel you could ask them?
I'm a very nosy person.
So clearly you had questions.
I had so many questions.
Precocious child.
Why am I in this school if you never taught me English? Right. Like, why are things the way that they are? It feels like there's a better way of doing things. To which my parents would be like, shut up. You should be grateful that you have what you have. Like, how dare you? And so I was very quickly disincentivized to ask any questions, but those questions never left. And so everything I knew from them kind of came from other people. Like, there was family lore passed down by, like, people adjacent to them, family friends.
My family's had that as well.
It was a long time to make this okay for them, it took them a long time to accept that their son was dating. But when they finally met one of my partners, I brought her home, and my dad took such a shining to her. He was telling her stuff from his life that he had never breathed to anyone else. I think I've rationalized it as like their journey has left them with these scars, and they understand that it's too much for them. It's too volatile for them to hold it. And it's too much for them to expect us to hold it. So they don't want to pass it on. But I think that's the issue, right?
But were they okay with divulging all these family secrets so publicly in your play? I mean, were they okay? Are they okay with it?
My parents know that I've taken this information and written a show about it. They know the subject matter. They know what I talk about. So they do know. And I think part of it is, at this point, they're older. My dad was 5 years old when Hitler died. He does not care anymore. My mom is 75. She's like, I've done my time. I have no secrets.
We were reading your resume online, and there were some interesting facts in there, including being able to juggle on stilts up to 5 feet.
Yes.
How in the
Was that just something that, in your course you had to learn? Is that?
I learned it for a show, which is always, I feel like, the prelude to any interesting skill an actor has. It was called Le Crasseau. It was a play by a French-Canadian playwright that I did in undergrad, and the production design was based on Cirque du Soleil. And so I played this character named King Moose, who was the leader of the people across the tracks. So like under the line, like the lower class people, the underclass. And they had this idea to put me in these 5-foot stilts. And so I was like 20 years old learning how to walk these stilts, performing a full play. It was great until the one performance where I remember my first line is like, I'm a man, and I have like these huge moose antlers on, this like bright blue face paint. I'm like walking out half naked on these stilts with these long leather pants covering the stilts. And I go, I'm a man. And then there's this pipe across the floor that is like in not the right place. And I step on it and slip off immediately. And I go, I'm a man. And I just slam on the floor and have to drag myself across the stage and get myself back up. That's like a core memory that I'll never forget. I will say that learning how to walk stilts in Louisiana is also a really great skill to have, because when it was time for the Mardi Gras parades, I would be contacted all the time if I wanted to be a stilt walker for these Mardi Gras balls or parades. So I kept I got to reinforce these skills. And then in grad school, there were so many assignments that were just meant to get us out of our heads into our bodies and just not be afraid of failure. And so one of them was a juggling assignment where we had to learn how to juggle and learn tricks and make that into a performance. And so me and my friend Patrick Poole created this Eastern European like super crazy workout tape where it was like these stilts are like 500 pounds each, and you put them on and the balls are like 60 pounds each, and like that was like our act, you know?
Oh my God.
So we were just like doing clown work, and I'm on stilts juggling.
We also saw that you are in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
So how did that come about? I'm thinking back now to your school days in a theatre with a bunch of people, just trying everything out in a sort of fantasy world.
I actually did not play D&D with my theater folks. I played D&D with some of my choir friends.
Oh, you were in a choir?
I was in choir.
Ah.
And there was a friend whose family was super into Dungeons and Dragons, 3.5 edition. They were playing at that moment. And he wanted to teach me and my friend Jeffrey how to play. So we skipped school one day and went to the local bookstore and Books 2 and spent the entire day learning how to play D&D 3.5. And that's my introduction. I was 17 years old. And then post-pandemic, no, this was right before a pandemic. In like 2019, I'm at a house party at my friend Tony's place. And I meet this guy, and he's like, "Hi, my name's Ned Donovan. It's nice to meet you. I'm a part of this Dungeons and Dragons podcast. You should listen to it. It's called Encounter Party." And I was like, "Cool, nice to meet you. I'm David." And then he goes and we go our separate ways. And I think, I'll never see this guy again. And then 2 weeks later, he calls me and he's like, "Hey, so one of our actors has to step out of our podcast, and we're going to Chicago soon to record season 2. We would like to just meet with you and see if you'd be a good fit for our group." And so I met with them, we got along great, and then I went to Chicago to record season 2 of this podcast. And then during lockdown, we were able to finagle things that we could go and record season 3 and finish out our campaign. And by the time we released season 3, we had hundreds of thousands of fans all over the world listening to our show. And then Dungeons & Dragons Entertainment One, the company handling their on-camera content at the time, was looking to produce their own actual play D&D show. So they produced 3 TV shows. One of them is Purple Worm, where it's a bunch of like celebrities playing D&D. They're playing level 1 characters that all die, but they're trying to see how long they can live. And it's a really improv and like spur of the moment. It's a lot of fun. Then there's Hero's Feast, which is based on the D&D cookbook. So it's a cooking show, but D&D.
Oh my gosh.
And then Encounter Party, which was the official Dungeons & Dragons actual play. So we transitioned from being a very plucky podcast into being like an on-camera, officially licensed D&D TV show.
So how does that work with things like being in an actors union? Or I don't know. You're in the theatre actors union.
Yes, I'm also in SAG-AFTRA.
How do they play a role in it, or not at all?
In my case, when we were recording the podcast, I was not in SAG-AFTRA yet. I didn't join until 2021. And by that point, we had already recorded the first 3 seasons of our podcast. And so that was done.
Yeah.
I joined, and then the possibility of the TV show came out. And then that brought up a lot of questions. Some of us are SAG. What does that mean? Then the union went on strike. And I thought, oh, no, this is not happening. But the thing about the strike was it was about certain contracts that we had with the AMPTP, these League of Producers and Networks and Studios that were producing all the on-camera content that we were striking against. And the contract for our show was not one of the contracts being struck. So we were actually able to shoot the show with full union blessing.
During the pandemic, you also said that you got into doing audiobook narrations, and I think you've won some awards recently, right, for that as well. So it's kind of ironic in the way you started out with ESL classes and then you become an award-winning voice artist.
Yes.
And you just got awarded some new awards.
Sorry, the petty side of me was like, fuck all my haters. Every single person that ever made fun of me for not being able to speak English or speaking English funny, according to them. Like, yeah, it's a very satisfying arc. I just won an award from the Society of Voice Arts and Sciences. I was part of this audio drama adaptation of All-Star Superman, which is a great production by Penguin Random House, where they adapted what a lot of people consider one of the greatest comics into an audio drama. And so we won for that, and then we're also Audie nominated, and the Audies are called the highest awards in audiobook narration. So we're going to wait and see if we win the trophy for that too.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Just turn in your like vocal samples and then you get the job, and then do they direct you like, okay, you have to sound more huskier or whatever, or is it
Karuna's looking for a second.
If this podcast doesn't make it and we don't get sponsors.
She wants an out.
That's the long game.
Hello.
It depends on the project. I feel at this point I've recorded over 100 books, and so a lot of the home records, as they call them, will trust me with the direction. So because they just trust me to run the technology on my own and to guide the performance and shape it on my own. But then there are other titles, whether they are incredibly culturally specific. Like I've done Chinese Danmei novels, I've done translations of Japanese novels, and I've been paired with directors from that community or culture because there are just these nuances or just ways of shaping the words or sounding things out that they really want to make sure we honor. So that's another consideration. And then another part of it is just like, what is the project in itself? I did a book for Tom Hanks, and I've done books for Minecraft, one of the largest IPs in the world. And when I do something for DC Comics, usually I'm going to go in the studio so they can work with me directly and just make sure that they have what they need. And I think the DC comic ones are a lot of fun because that feels like very much like what I imagine voiceover for animation is. I was just in there doing another project that I can't say yet, but it was very much like, I'm going to put on a character voice and I'm going to talk like this. Do you like this? And they'd be like, that's great. Let's continue doing that.
Forget about it.
Yeah. And then like, just do whatever I need to do. And then they're like, all right, cool. Let's try this character, flip to this page, and let me see what you do with this. And then I would just transform my voice and speak as this other character. And if they liked that, they would go, wonderful, we'll move on to the next person. And then we'll just keep doing that. It was like a roulette of characters. And those are so much fun because, you know, it's the devil's in the details. You prep for it, and then you show them what your first impulse is, and either they'll go, great, or let's reel that back. Let's try something else. But it's fun because then it feels like an artistic collaboration in the booth, like on the fly with my director and my producers.
Are there any particular actors that you admire and aspire to?
I think one of the reasons I gravitate towards theater so much is because I do believe in lineage and legacy. And in theater, it is rife with that. We are so influenced by what came before, and we are creating in the context of what came before. So for me, specifically as an Asian American man working predominantly in classical theater, there's this wonderful actor named Randall Duck Kim. Most people know him as the Keymaker from the second Matrix movie or Poe's dad.
Yeah, our friend Kenneth Lee also mentioned him as well in the podcast.
Shakespeare.
Yeah.
People just don't know about him, but he was breaking barriers. He played Pericles at the Public Theater in the 70s. He played Hamlet at the Guthrie. And, you know, for all this talk about DEI and these leaps in representation, he was doing this 40 or 50 years ago, you know? And people just, I feel like in some ways people don't know their history when they don't know about figures like this. And so when I think about my career and the way that I want to honor the work, I just think about the way he approaches his work and the ways that he was able to live in these spaces and do such quality work while also approaching the work with this curiosity of, well, how did people in this time live? And what can we learn from them? Because that's really why we keep doing these plays. I recently worked with another actor named John Douglas Thompson. He's been called one of the greatest living Shakespearean actors alive by the New York Times, and he's also a actor on The Gilded Age, and he was on Mayor of Easttown.
You gave a TEDx talk a while back.
Wow, you did a lot of research.
Asian stereotypes.
Yes.
So her second name was the researcher, the investigator.
Digging up dirt. No, but I mean, you did give that TEDx talk about Asian stereotypes.
Yeah.
And I was very impressed with your philosophy towards discrimination. You talk about how you can't really control that, but you can control other things.
Right.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I liken it to climbing a mountain. If you are looking at the mountain as a whole before you even start, it's going to look insurmountable. And a lot of people don't allow themselves to try because of that fear, because they see the obstacle and they just can't get over that. So I try to shift focus instead to the steps in front of me. So as I take each step, I try to identify, what are they? What do I need to do? Can I prepare myself for these steps? And then take the step. And then once I take that step, I look at the next step and prepare for that one and just keep going. And by virtue of that, actions ripple out and there's an effect that happens immediately around me. And so this fear around me is what I have an effect over, that I have control over. And that's really it. And so when we see things, you know, from the mountaintop or things that feel insurmountable kind of all around us, it is very easy, I think, to let that overwhelm us. But the centering that I need in my life is, what can I control around me? And what are those steps that I can take on a day-to-day basis to either accomplish my goals or just live my life or feel that I'm tilting things toward good?
So what projects do you have on the horizon?
I am doing a production of Exec at the Mint Theater Company that goes up in Theater Row in New York. It starts performances February 21st and runs until the end of March.
What's it about?
It is an old English comedy from the 1920s by a playwright called Harold Brigman. The Mint's mission is to bring back forgotten plays that would be good for the zeitgeist that we're in. And so this play is about a wedding catering business in Lancashire that's not doing well. And then all of a sudden their fortunes turn, and they're not sure why, but it might have to do something with Zach. I have my next 3 plays booked already. So when Zach is in tech, I start rehearsals for something else. And then when that play is nearing its end, then I start rehearsals for something else.
Thank you very much, David, for coming on to Asians and Art.
Yeah, thank you for having me, y'all.
It was great to talk to you today.
Yeah, likewise.